Have you ever applauded when nobody else did? Or waved back at someone who wasn't actually waving at you? Or replied, "You too," to a waiter who said, "Enjoy your meal," and then spent the next 5 years wishing you could erase the memory? The moment lasts only a few seconds. Everybody moves on. Everybody forgets. Except your brain. Years later, you're lying in bed. The room is dark. You're finally ready to sleep. And for some reason, your brain decides this is the perfect moment to replay the entire thing. The awkward smile, the silence, the feeling in your stomach. Suddenly, you're reliving an embarrassing moment that happened years ago. And somehow, it still hurts. Why? Why do embarrassing memories seem to attack you at night? Most people assume the answer is simple. Maybe your brain enjoys torturing you. After all, it somehow stayed silent during your exams, but remembers an awkward conversation from 10 years ago with perfect clarity. Maybe it's broken. Maybe it's just random. But none of those explanations are true. In fact, the real answer has surprisingly little to do with embarrassment, because your brain may not be replaying those moments to punish you. It may be replaying them because for most of human history, forgetting them could have been dangerous. To understand why, we need to go back thousands of years, long before bedrooms, long before alarm clocks, long before social media, back to a time when your survival depended on something most people rarely think about today: other people. For our ancestors, being part of a group wasn't just important, it was everything. Groups shared food. Groups shared protection. Groups shared knowledge. Groups increased your chances of surviving long enough to have children. A person completely alone faced enormous risks. And because of that, the human brain evolved to pay extraordinary attention to social information. Who was trustworthy? Who was helpful? Who could be relied upon? And just as importantly, how you fit into the group. Today, accidentally waving at the wrong person is harmless. 5,000 years ago, making a serious social mistake inside a small community could damage relationships that mattered to your survival. Your brain doesn't always understand the difference. It still treats many social experiences as extremely important, especially the ones that feel like mistakes. But if embarrassing memories are really connected to survival, another question appears. Why do they show up at night? Why not while you're eating breakfast? Why not during a meeting? Why not in the middle of a busy afternoon? The answer is that your brain behaves differently when the world becomes quiet. During the day, your attention is constantly occupied. Conversations, notifications, work, decisions, traffic, problems. Your brain is busy dealing with the present. But when night arrives, many of those distractions disappear. The external world becomes quieter, and the internal world becomes louder. Old conversations, unfinished worries, past experiences, embarrassing memories. Psychologists often describe this as a shift toward self-reflection. With fewer external demands competing for attention, your mind naturally begins reviewing information from your life. And that's where things get interesting, because your brain doesn't organize memories according to how pleasant they are. It organizes them according to how useful they might be. This is one of the most important ideas in psychology. Your brain is not designed to maximize happiness. It is designed to improve survival. And from a survival perspective, mistakes are valuable. Imagine touching a hot stove. You don't want to forget that lesson. The pain teaches you something important. The same principle applies to social mistakes. Your brain treats many embarrassing moments as information worth remembering, not because they're painful, because they might help you avoid future mistakes. In other words, your brain is constantly acting like a mistake detector. Whenever something feels socially uncomfortable, your brain pays attention. Maybe you interrupted someone. Maybe you misunderstood a situation. Maybe you said something awkward. Maybe you misread a room. The emotional discomfort acts like a highlighter. It tells your brain, this matters. And once your brain decides something matters, it becomes harder to ignore. It's strange. You might forget what you had for lunch 3 weeks ago, but your brain has somehow preserved an awkward conversation from years ago in ultra-high definition. The emotional significance makes the memory stronger. Researchers have found that negative experiences often receive special treatment in memory systems. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Forgetting a pleasant experience is usually harmless. Forgetting a dangerous mistake can be costly. The brain evolved to be cautious, sometimes excessively cautious. And that's why embarrassing memories can feel so persistent. But here's the strange part. Most of the people involved in your embarrassing memory probably don't remember it at all. The audience that watched you tell that awkward joke? They've forgotten. The people who saw you wave at the wrong person? They've forgotten. In fact, if you ask them about it today, there's a good chance they'd look at you and say, "What are you talking about?" And that's where something called the spotlight effect comes in. Psychologists use this term to describe a very common mental illusion, the feeling that other people are paying far more attention to you than they actually are. Imagine walking into a room. Everyone else is carrying around their own worries, their own plans, their own conversations. But from your perspective, it feels as if a spotlight is shining directly on you. Every mistake feels visible. Every awkward moment feels obvious. Every embarrassing memory feels unforgettable. The problem is that the spotlight mostly exists inside your own mind, because nobody experiences your mistakes the way you do. You see the entire event. You feel every second of it. You hear every awkward word. You replay every uncomfortable detail. Everyone else only sees a tiny piece of the story, and often, they're too busy thinking about themselves to think much about you at all. That's one reason embarrassing memories can become so powerful. Embarrassment is a unique emotion. For a brief moment, it forces you to see yourself through someone else's eyes, or at least, through the version of their eyes that exists inside your imagination. You start wondering, how did I look? What did they think? Did they notice? Will they remember? But the answer is often much less dramatic than your brain assumes. Most people aren't studying you, they're studying themselves. They're worrying about their own mistakes, their own awkward moments, their own embarrassing memories. In other words, while you're busy reliving your most embarrassing moment, someone else is probably busy reliving theirs. But your brain still treats the event as important. Why? Because your brain isn't tracking what other people remember. It's tracking what you might learn. To your brain, the memory is unfinished business, a lesson worth reviewing, again, and again, and again. At this point, you might be wondering something. If your brain is trying to help you, why does it feel so terrible? Why does the memory still make you cringe? The answer lies in the way emotions strengthen learning. Strong emotions act like markers. They tell the brain to pay attention. The discomfort is not the purpose. The discomfort is the signal. Your brain isn't trying to make you suffer. It's trying to make sure the lesson sticks. Unfortunately, the system was designed for a world very different from the one we live in today. Our ancestors lived in small groups. Social relationships had enormous consequences. A mistake could affect trust, status, cooperation, belonging. To an ancient human brain, social errors weren't merely awkward, they could be dangerous. And although modern life has changed dramatically, your brain still carries many of those ancient instincts. It still reacts strongly to social situations. It still remembers moments that feel important. It still reviews those moments when the world becomes quiet enough to hear them. So the next time you're lying awake at 3:17 in the morning, and an embarrassing memory suddenly appears, remember something your brain often forgets. The story didn't end with the mistake. It ended with you moving on. Your brain treats these moments like evidence. Evidence that you made a mistake, but maybe they're evidence of something else. Because every human being carries memories like these. Not because they're broken, not because they're socially awkward, but because being human means occasionally getting things wrong and then learning from them. Thousands of years ago, remembering a mistake might have helped your ancestors survive. Today, those same memories may simply be reminding you of something much less dramatic. That you're human, and so is everyone else. And maybe remembering that might help you sleep.